The poet Rumi once said, "O ye who cannot take a good rub, how will you ever be a polished gem?" I love that quote because all of us take a pretty good rub as we go through life. But through these sufferings, through these problems that we go through, each makes us stronger. It makes us a better version of ourselves. The problem is, because of these rubbings, these emotional attachments to this past rubbing actually suppress our potential. Studies are beginning to show that one of the most powerful things a human being can do to improve their health, well-being, and emotional state is to let go of this negative emotion towards other people who wronged us or past decisions we made that we regret. And when you do this, remarkable things happen. The way to do this is through the act of forgiveness. My fascination with forgiveness happened one day in 2015. I was at an institute which basically trains people to develop the brainwave states of Zen Roshi monks who have spent 20 to 40 years in meditation. Now, how they do that is they map the brainwaves of these monks, and then they take willing subjects like me. They put you in a chamber where you meditate for 5 days with 12 electrodes taped to your brain, and you go through a process of training your brain to emulate the brainwave states of these monks. Now, when the scientists were developing this approach, they were experimenting with lots of different individuals. And individuals could take any approach they want. Basically, they would see a number, a sound, a visual that would create a biofeedback loop. They had to train their brains to influence the number or the sound. And if they trained their brain right, their brains would move towards the desired state. That desired state, for those of you who are brainwave geeks, is basically high alpha amplitude and left-right brain coherence. So people would come and people could try any approach they wanted. Yoga, prayer, meditation, reciting mantras, visualization. And there was this one lady, let's call her Sally, who somehow was showing the biggest improvement. Like her brainwaves were just becoming glorious and amazing. And the scientists got Sally out of the chamber and asked her, "What are you doing? Because you're showing this amazing progress." Sally said, "I don't know. All I'm trying to do is forgive my husband for being such an asshole." And the scientists hit on it. The act that was creating the biggest movements in brainwave states towards that of Zen Roshi monks was the act of forgiveness. That institute pivoted the entire training methodology to insist that people who went through the training for 5 days straight practice nothing but forgiveness. I attended that training and I saw huge improvements in my brainwave states as I was asked to forgive everything in my life, from bad decisions I made in my younger years to even tiny irritants or issues I had with people I know I love. All of us carry little judgments, little negative memories towards everyone, especially the people we love. And when you practice forgiveness, you practice a form of acceptance to everything that happens. The baggage disappears. And this, it turns out, shifts your very being and biology. Studies are now beginning to show that forgiveness improves endurance. One Israeli study found that after people practiced forgiveness, they had better endurance marching up and down a hill. Another study showed that people's vertical jump improve when they practice forgiveness. When I shared that, I had an NBA Olympian reach out to me to find out where he could learn forgiveness. And as forgiveness research is getting more sophisticated, science is now finding that forgiveness does the following. It decreased levels of anger and hostility. It increased feelings of love. It enhances your capacity to trust. It gives you freedom from the events of the past. It improves your health. It creates improvements from psychiatric disorders. There's a long list of benefits from forgiveness. This is why forgiveness is phase 3 of the 6-phase meditation. What you're going to learn in this video is the forgiveness ritual that's coming out from many of the institutions around the world that are training people to practice forgiveness, to elevate their levels of consciousness and create more coherent brainwave states, and the brainwave states more corresponding to that of experienced meditators. What these institutions and these studies are finding is the following. There are several rules of forgiveness worth remembering. The first is this: you can forgive anything, absolutely anything. No matter how abused you were, no matter how cruel the abuser, you can forgive anything. We've read amazing books by Holocaust survivors who forgave the person who butchered their entire families. Nelson Mandela forgave his jailers. Not all of us can get to that level immediately, but just like compassion, forgiveness is a trainable skill, and one can forgive anything. Number two, forgiveness is not dropping the charge. If someone wronged you, in a sense did something illegal, you can forgive them, but you still go ahead with reporting them to the police because they could be a danger to society. For example, I once had a trusted employee swindle money from my company. I practiced forgiveness on him, so when I saw him in court, I could be calm, peaceful, and not get triggered by his act. But I still saw him in court. He was arrested by the police, and he still had to go through the legal system. Forgiveness does not mean dropping the charge. And the third rule is the other person does not have to forgive you in return. Only you have to forgive that person. If you were in a heated argument with a friend and they are not as spiritually developed and are still angry at you, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you forgive them, you gain the benefits of forgiveness. They do not have to forgive you. Interestingly, some studies are showing that when you forgive another person, even if they don't know you forgave them, things start shifting in the relationship, and it makes it easier for them to forgive you in turn. Forgiveness seems to transcend the physical world. I've seen some bizarre things happen with the application of forgiveness. Someone would forgive a family member for something truly cruel, such as abuse. They have not spoken for years and years, and within hours or days of the initial person forgiving the family member who abused them, that family member who hasn't stayed in touch for years suddenly shoots them a message forgiving them on WhatsApp. Can't explain it, but it seems to be that we're more deeply connected than we think, and when you forgive someone else, it impacts them in a deep spiritual way too. So now let's talk about the ritual of forgiveness. This is what the process looks like. This process comes from multiple scientists and neuroscientists I interviewed who have been studying forgiveness as a way to create better brainwave states. First, identify the perpetrator, the person you're choosing to forgive. Now, when you first start doing this exercise, don't pick someone who did something really painful to you. An ex who cheated on you, someone who abused you, someone who accused you of something you didn't do. That takes a little bit more forgiveness muscle. So you're going to pick something simple. But as you work your forgiveness muscle, that muscle gets stronger, and soon you'll be able to forgive everything and anyone in your life. But to start, if you're new to forgiveness, pick something easy to forgive. Number two, create the space. What this means is decide where you're going to forgive this person in the context of this mental exercise. I once had to forgive a school principal. I went to a school where the principal was rather abusive. There was a day where I forgot to bring my physical exercise outfit to school. And so I couldn't practice that day. And the principal decided for some reason that he needed to punish me. I was made to stand in the hot sun in my full school uniform in a basketball court for 3 hours until I almost fainted. That was completely uncalled for. And it really shook me as a 14-year-old. I had to forgive my school principal when I was at one of these institutes studying forgiveness. When I chose to forgive him, I saw the setting as that basketball court where I was made to stand in the sun. Now you're going to choose the setting. It could be a living room. It could be a monastery. It could be on a beautiful mountain. The setting could be made up, it could be a real world location, but you're going to imagine a setting that you feel comfortable in where you're going to forgive the perpetrator. In step 3, you now have the perpetrator and you have the space. You're now going to read the charge. This is the charge I might have read to my former school principal. Sir, I know I made a mistake and I forgot my PE shots, but you had no right to do what you did. I was only 14 years old. My act was simply that I forgot to pack my shorts that day. I did not deserve to be punished, humiliated, made to stand till I nearly fainted on a hot basketball court on a day when the weather was intense and the heat was intense. I had other students laugh at me. I felt really, really, really hurt and humiliated. I was pulled out of classes I could not attend. And I wish you hadn't done that. It was cruel, it was uncalled for, and no student under you should ever go through that degree of humiliation and punishment again for something so small. The punishment must fit the crime. That is reading the charge. You imagine you're facing the person and you're reading them the charge of what they did to you. And now it's going to get a little tricky. You're going to feel the pain. You're going to put yourself back in that state and feel the pain. You do not suppress the pain, you feel it. This is the part where you might want to punch the pillow you're holding. You might want to scream. You might shed a tear. Even as I think about that moment on the basketball court, I can feel that pain right now. Feel the pain. Feel free to bang the armrest of your chair to make a sound if you must. Feel the pain, but only for a minute. And then stop. Let the pain come, but only for a minute, max 2 minutes. And then you stop. If the pain isn't very big, it's okay to feel the pain for 10 or 20 seconds. A minute to 2 is about the max. But at that point, you stop. And you now go to step 5. In step 5, you think about what you learned from the event. I learned that I was so much stronger than I ever thought I was, standing straight like that, like a soldier as a 14-year-old boy in a hot basketball court. Think about what you learned from that event, how it made you stronger. Remember that quote from Rumi, "O ye who cannot take a good rub, how will you ever become a polished gem?" How did that instance polish you and make you more of the gem that you are today? Spend about 30 seconds to a minute reflecting on this, and then you go to step 6. Step 6 is tricky. In step 6, you're going to ask yourself, why did this person do what they did to you? And you're going to imagine, try to trace back what they experienced in their past that led them to be who they were, the person who wronged you. When I think about the past of my principal, I knew he was a weightlifter. I knew he grew up in a very restricted religious society. So perhaps where he came from, being a former weight trainer in a highly restricted society, maybe he had an abusive coach. Maybe he was pushed to do his best because he was yelled at, he was punished, he went through pain. Maybe that was the way he was raised. And maybe he was simply thinking that that same approach would make me a better student. So you see, you're not justifying it, but you're attempting, almost like a psychoanalyst, to try to figure out what did they experience in the past that made them the abuser, that made them wrong you. Remember this quote, "Hurt people hurt people." Someone who has been hurt in the past is more likely to take that hurt and pass it on to someone else. You, my friend, are breaking that chain because you're practicing forgiveness. The hurt that you experience, you're cutting the cord. By being a forgiving individual, you're cutting that cord so you don't project that hurt onto the next person. This is why forgiveness is so powerful. And now we go to step 7. See it from their eyes. At this point, you practice empathy. You try to see how they were viewing the incident from their eyes. This doesn't make what they do correct. But by seeking to understand, you help give yourself the power to forgive. I told you about the employee I had who stole from me. It was quite a big sum, close to 100 grand, through an intricate series of cons. When I see it from his eyes, I try to imagine what he was thinking. I knew that he had a wife who was going for surgery. And perhaps one of the reasons that made him steal is that he needed the money to facilitate his wife's surgery. I also know he had a brother who was behind bars. Maybe he didn't have good role models in his life, and his understanding of what is right and wrong may have been slightly fuzzy. By seeing it from their eyes, you're not justifying what they did, but again, you're attempting to practice empathy to understand why they did it. This is not for them. They don't even know you're forgiving them. This is for you to forgive. And that brings us to step 8 in the 8 steps to forgiveness. This is the final step, and it's called forgive into love. At this point, you see them. You look at their face. You look at them in their eye. You've gone through all the previous steps. You've identified the perpetrator. You've set the space. You've read the charge. You've identified the pain. You've then gone on to step 5. You've tried to understand what you learned from it. You have tried to understand what caused them to become the perpetrator, what past event led them to where they are today. You've seen it from their eyes. And now, in step 8, you forgive into love. You imagine them coming to you, you hug them, and you imagine forgiving them with love. Now here's the trick. If you can comfortably see yourself hugging them with compassion, remember compassion from phase 1, then you're done. You've forgiven them. You may not need to go back into this. But if you cannot do this, then you stop there, and the next day in your 6th phase, you repeat the process with them. You keep repeating it, and you may need to do it 7, 8, maybe 20 times until you can feel yourself comfortably hugging them and forgiving into love. Keep in mind, that's all you need to do. You don't have to pick up the phone, write them a letter. You don't have to see them or think about them again. You're not forgiving them for them. You're forgiving them for you. That is what forgiveness into love means. You've transmuted the pain. And this is phase 3. I didn't say this was going to be easy, but something beautiful happens as you start practicing this phase. It starts getting easier and easier and easier after you've forgiven all of your past events. And to me, this took about 1 year of practicing the 6th phase, 365 forgiveness sessions. You start realizing that there's very little new things to forgive, and you start becoming more understanding of everything around you. Sometimes you may wake up and not really have anything to forgive. This is normal. Just skip phase 3 or use that opportunity to practice maybe another transcendent practice, maybe creative visualization, healing, whatever you have time for. Neale Donald Walsch, the famous author of Conversations with God, the book series that sold 15 million books, and the Mindvalley author, famously said, "The master does not need to forgive, for the master understands." What Neale was saying is once you get really good at forgiveness, you no longer need to forgive, because you, as a master, instantly understand. You can get there too. And this makes you an incredible force for good on the planet. Now, before we go into the exercise, I need to clarify one important thing. Sometimes the person you're forgiving is not someone else, but it's you. It's a younger, less wise, less mature, less developed version of you. I had to forgive myself for a bad business decision I made in the past that cost me millions upon millions of dollars. I had to forgive myself for mistakes I made that really hurt my health. When you need to forgive yourself for something, this is as important as forgiving someone else. You see that younger version of yourself. When I see myself as the inexperienced entrepreneur who made that mistake, I see a younger version of myself, 12 years younger than who I am today. I imagine as if me today is an older brother to that younger version, and I forgive that younger version into love. So if you need to forgive yourself for something, you use the exact same protocol, but you see that younger version of yourself, and the feeling or emotion you have is that you are an older, wiser brother or sister to this younger version. Now, as we go into this exercise that I'm going to guide you through, you're going to start your first forgiveness. And I want you to pick something easy. A younger version of yourself or someone who hurt you, but something that you know is easy to forgive. Not something that's going to take multiple sessions, but perhaps you could forgive completely in today's session or over 2 or 3 or 4 days. Ready? We'll now begin the exercise.